I'm Alex Berman, and you're watching Selling Breakdowns. You've got an idea for a movie, right? Everybody does. Some story you'd like to capture on film. But if you looked at movies as a pure investment, where the only thing you cared about was making money, then what kind of movie would you make? Well, it turns out there's only one sensible answer: horror. Today, we're going to look at an American production house called Blumhouse, who have produced some of the highest grossing horror films of all time. We'll compare their model to that of other non-horror studios and see why their genre has such a shocking return on investment. Horror films have a long history, dating back to the start of cinema itself. Probably the earliest is the film called Le Manoir du Diable by Jorge Méliès. A German film, The Golem, from 1915, was one of the first monster movies and was hugely influential over the years. The genre has always had trends over the decades. The 30s had literary classics like Frankenstein, Dracula, and The Invisible Man. After the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the 50s saw a theme of radiation-fueled giants like the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms or Godzilla. The 70s was demonic possession with The Exorcist, Carrie, The Omen. And the 80s and 90s were slashers and serial killers. Some of the greatest of all time: Freddy Krueger, Halloween, Scream, Silence of the Lambs. This year, the big horror hits were It, Get Out, Split, and Annabelle Creation. Some might include Alien Covenant and the last Resident Evil film as well, which would make horror 6 of the top 30 biggest grossing movies worldwide in 2017. It was a pretty famous book and film before the remake, and Annabelle Creation is actually the 4th film in the popular series called The Conjuring. But Get Out and Split are completely original screenplays made by Blumhouse Productions. Jason Blum started Blumhouse back in 2009, and it hit the scene with a bang, producing Paranormal Activity. The production budget was just $15,000, and it went on to gross $193 million, giving it the best return on investment of any film in history. And you might think, okay, they just got lucky. Well, they've done it again and again. Paranormal Activity 2 upped the budget to $3 million, but still made $177 million. Then there were hits like Insidious, The Purge, Unfriended. All of these had an ROI of over 1,000%. Split, despite having big stars in James McAvoy and director M. Night Shyamalan, only cost $9 million and made $278 million. Get Out was even more surprising. It had no big names and was a directing debut for Jordan Peele, who was known for his comedy double act Key and Peele. Again, a small budget of $4.5 million and a huge box office of $253 million. Peele himself made an interesting comment about how comedy and horror are so close. You build tension and then you have a release. It's all the timing. And though he might be right from a filmmaking perspective, the same isn't true when it comes to marketing. Do you think an intelligent comedy that was a critique about race in America would make $250 million at the box office? Not a hope. Get Out needed the horror element to make it marketable. And you know why? Because horror is so much easier to sell. Think about why each genre is popular. Comedy makes you laugh, romantic comedies give people that warm emotional kick, action movies are exciting, but try getting that in a trailer or a billboard. Jokes need context, romance needs time. Action is simple, but you spoil the film if you show all the best pieces in a trailer. But for a horror film trailer, get some dark lighting, throw in some screams and a couple jump scares, and you've answered the only question anyone cares about. Is it scary? Marketing movies has become extremely expensive, maybe in part to the aggregation site Rotten Tomatoes. You can see a bit more about this in our video a couple weeks ago about review sites. Link in the description. Unless a movie has universal glowing reviews, you need to really push to get people in the doors. We talk a lot about production budgets today, but as a rule of thumb, you can assume that the marketing budget is equal to the production budget. It's almost impossible to get any figures on this though, so we're working on estimates. A good rule of thumb is whenever somebody gives you a number, let's say a film costs $100 million, double that to get the true cost of the film, including the marketing. Horror films still need promotion, but since their market is smaller, thanks to being R-rated most of the time, they don't need to cast their net as wide as, say, Marvel Studios. Let's actually compare the two, Blumhouse and Marvel Studios. You might think that although Blumhouse makes really high ROI thanks to the low cost of making a horror film, they're still never going to make that kind of money that a blockbuster giant like Marvel does. Well, since Blumhouse launched in 2009, they've made 64 films. The highest budget has been $10 million, but the vast majority were $5 million or under. In total, they've spent around $200 million on production. Their total box office has been $4.5 billion. That's a return of $4.3 billion in just 8 years. Obviously, there are marketing costs and they work with major distributors, so actual profit is way less than that, but those are still incredibly impressive numbers. What about Marvel Studios? In the same time period, they've made 14 movies, costing $2.6 billion and grossing $11.8 billion. So a $9.2 billion return. But their marketing spend is astronomical, at least $100 million a movie, so the two studios are actually on a pretty similar level. Let's bring in a third studio, DreamWorks Animation, for a little more context. Their figures since 2009 are $2.5 billion spent on production for $8.2 billion in box office. So you see what we mean about horror. The risk is far, far lower, but the gains are almost the same. They don't need big names attached to them. They don't even need good reviews. Sure, the big hits like Get Out, Split, and Paranormal Activity are well reviewed, but Blumhouse still averaged about $100 million for each of Ouija, The Purge and its sequels, the Insidious sequels, and many of the paranormal sequels, despite a critical panning. Here's the thing. Studios have realized that if you put together a good, scary trailer and open as widely as you can across the country, you'll get an audience. A non-Blumhouse film from 2012, The Devil Inside, was clearly made to copy Paranormal Activity's success using an uncredited production house called Room 101, who had actually worked on the paranormal sequels. Paramount distributed it and spent around $5 million promoting it, despite it being made for under $1 million. It opened in 2,500 cinemas in the US and made over $50 million domestically, and about the same overseas. Audiences hated it, people routinely booed in the cinemas, and it had terrible reviews on every site. It was a terrible film and was dead in the water by the second week, but it didn't matter. 1 week had been enough. It's a total smash and grab. The statistical analysis site 538.com shows how year after year, the horror genre has outperformed every other on return on investment. They make the point that not only are they helped by cheap production, but they also work well across languages. The scripts are often pretty basic, there's very little nuance so you won't lose much in translation. A Scream is pretty universal, right? It works the other way too, with popular foreign horror often getting a like-for-like Hollywood remake. Think The Grudge and The Ring. So, you don't need to be the next Paul Thomas Anderson or Charlie Kaufman if you want to make money from the movies. Grab a camcorder, a bucket of ketchup, and remember, you only need a great 90-second trailer. The other 90 minutes can go to hell. Want to learn more about business theory and history? Be sure to like and subscribe to be notified of our next segment.